It was supposed to be just another ordinary day. Cameras flashing, fans screaming, the usual hum of excitement surrounding one of China's most beloved stars, Xiao Zhan. But what happened after that fateful accident changed everything. Not just for him, but for everyone who had ever admired his strength, his calmness, and his unmatched dedication. The world saw the headlines. Xiao Zhan involved in an accident. But what the world didn't see was what happened after. The silence that followed. The storm that brewed behind his calm eyes. The choice he made that no one ever expected, to leave. The moment the accident happened, chaos erupted. The streets were filled with flashing lights, sirens screamed, and fans gathered in confusion and fear. Xiao Zhan was rushed to the hospital, his condition uncertain. Cameras couldn't capture the trembling in his hands, the fog in his eyes, or the heavy weight pressing against his chest as he whispered, "I just need to get away." When the doctors cleared him with minor injuries, everyone assumed he would return to the spotlight as he always did, composed, smiling, and ready to perform. But something inside him had changed. That night, he stood by the hospital window, looking out at the city lights flickering like distant stars. His reflection stared back at him, pale, shaken, and quieter than ever. It wasn't fear that consumed him. It was realization. Life had shown him how fragile everything was. Fame, success, applause, all of it could vanish in a heartbeat. So Xiao Zhan made a decision. A quiet, heartbreaking one. He left. No announcements, no press conferences, no dramatic farewell. Just a note, short, handwritten, and heavy with emotion. It read, "Sometimes, to find yourself again, you have to disappear for a while." His team was in disbelief. His fans were heartbroken. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said he had gone abroad. Others claimed he had been seen near the sea. But the truth was far more poetic and painful. Xiao Zhan had vanished into silence. He left the bright city behind and retreated into a small mountain village far from the noise of fame. Days passed without cameras or scripts. For the first time in years, he woke up to the sound of birds instead of alarm clocks. He walked through forests, sat by rivers, and found peace in simplicity. Yet even there, the memories followed him. The accident replayed in his mind, every flash, every second, every heartbeat. Sometimes at night, he'd sit by the window of a small wooden house, staring at the stars that blanketed the sky. He'd remember the screams, the sirens, the fear in the eyes of his fans. He'd remember how fragile it all felt. And in that stillness, he began to heal, slowly, quietly, and beautifully. One afternoon, an old man from the village asked him, "Young man, what are you running from?" Xiao Zhan smiled faintly and replied, "Not running, just learning to breathe again." That single sentence carried the weight of his soul. Back in the city, the world couldn't stop wondering where he had gone. Social media burned with questions. Did Xiao Zhan quit? Will he ever come back? His name trended for weeks, and even though he wasn't there to see it, the love never stopped. Fan messages flooded in. Thousands of letters filled with hope, worry, and unwavering support. Months passed. Xiao Zhan remained hidden, but something was changing. In that mountain village, he began to sketch again. Not for work, but for peace. He painted the sunrise over the hills, the mist that danced over the river, and sometimes faces he missed, the fans, his friends, and those who stood by him. Each brushstroke carried emotion. Each color spoke of renewal. One evening, as rain tapped gently against his window, Xiao Zhan opened his old phone. Notifications buzzed, one after another, hundreds, thousands. Videos, fan edits, messages, prayers. He watched in silence as people from all over the world said the same thing. "We miss you." He couldn't stop the tears that fell. He realized that no matter how far he went, he was never truly gone from their hearts. Fame had once felt like a cage, but now it felt like a bond, a connection deeper than he had ever imagined. The next morning, Xiao Zhan walked down to the village bridge. The air was cool, the world quiet. He looked at his reflection in the river, not as a celebrity, not as a star, but as a man who had survived. The accident had broken something in him, yes, but it had also awakened something beautiful, the desire to live more honestly, more freely, more humanly. And then, with the wind carrying whispers through the trees, he smiled. For the first time in months, it wasn't forced. It was real. A few days later, an old villager saw him packing his small bag. "Leaving again?" the old man asked. Xiao Zhan nodded. "This time, I'm not running away. I'm going home." When he finally stepped into the city again, everything felt different. The noise was still there, but it no longer scared him. The lights were still blinding, but they didn't weigh him down. His fans spotted him at the airport. No entourage, no cameras, just Xiao Zhan in a plain jacket, smiling softly. The internet exploded that day. Xiao Zhan is back. He looks different, calmer, happier. Welcome home, our star. What no one knew was the quiet battle he had fought in his soul. The healing, the reflection, the strength it took to return. The accident had changed him, yes, but not by breaking him, by awakening him. When he finally faced the cameras again for an interview, his words silenced everyone. "I left because I needed to remember who I was without all of this. And now, I'm here because I remembered why I started, for love, for stories, for the people who believed in me." The studio erupted in applause. But Xiao Zhan just bowed his head humbly, a small tear glistening at the corner of his eye. Behind the fame, behind the lights, he was still that same boy who dreamed big, loved deeply, and cared endlessly. The accident didn't end his story. It gave him a new beginning. And in that new beginning, Xiao Zhan wasn't just a star anymore. He was human, vulnerable, real, and radiant in a way that no spotlight could ever recreate. His return wasn't loud, but it was powerful. His smile wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And in the eyes of his fans, that made him shine brighter than ever before. Because sometimes, leaving isn't the end. It's the start of becoming who you were always meant to be. So when people ask, why did Xiao Zhan leave after the accident? The answer is simple. He didn't leave to disappear. He left to rediscover. And when he came back, he wasn't just Xiao Zhan the actor. He was Xiao Zhan, the survivor, the dreamer, the man who found light again. The night after the accident was one the world would never forget. The streets still smelled of burnt rubber and smoke, and the flashing red and blue lights faded into the distance. But for Xiao Zhan, the sound of the sirens kept echoing in his head long after they stopped. Every flash of light, every sudden noise felt like a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. He was alive, but something inside him wasn't. When the doctor said he could go home, everyone expected him to rest and recover quietly. Yet the look in his eyes told another story. He didn't want to go home, not to the busy apartment filled with awards, cameras, and scripts. He didn't want the noise. He wanted silence, real, untouched silence. That same night, without telling anyone, Xiao Zhan packed a small bag. Just his phone, a notebook, and a black hoodie. He left through the hospital's back door, his cap pulled low, face hidden behind a mask. The security guards didn't even recognize him. The city lights glowed in the distance like ghosts of fame chasing after him. But he didn't look back. The rain had started again, soft at first, then stronger, drumming against the pavement as if the sky itself was trying to stop him from leaving. He walked faster, every drop mixing with the tears he refused to let fall. He didn't care where he was going, only that it was away. At a small bus station on the edge of the city, he stood alone. No one else was there, just the faint hum of street lights and the whisper of the wind. The next bus was heading toward a remote mountain town. He didn't even check the destination. He just bought a ticket and got on. As the bus rolled through the night, Xiao Zhan stared out the window. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and gold. He pressed his forehead against the glass, feeling the cold seep through. In that reflection, he didn't see Xiao Zhan, the superstar. He saw a man stripped of everything: fame, power, confidence, left with nothing but questions. What if that accident was a sign? He whispered to himself. What if I was meant to stop chasing and start living? Hours passed. The bus climbed higher into the mountains, winding through fog and rain. By the time dawn broke, the city was far behind him. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. The silence was deep, almost sacred. He stepped off the bus and looked around. There was no crowd, no cameras, no noise. Just the gentle rustle of trees and the sound of a distant river. For the first time in years, he could breathe without pressure on his chest. He rented a small wooden cabin on the edge of a quiet village. The old woman who owned it didn't recognize him, and that was exactly what he wanted. She smiled kindly and said, "You look tired, son. Rest here. The mountains heal everything." He smiled back faintly. "I hope so." Days turned into weeks. Xiao Zhan started to live like a different person. He woke up with the sunrise, chopped wood, cooked simple meals, and spent hours walking along the trails. Sometimes he would sit by the river, throwing pebbles into the water, watching the ripples fade, like his fame, slowly disappearing into the calm. At night, he'd light a candle and write in his notebook, words that came straight from the heart. Pain, confusion, memories of the accident, flashes of fear, but also gratitude. Gratitude that he was still alive. In one of his entries, he wrote, "The world expects me to be perfect, but perfection feels like a cage. Maybe it's okay to be human again." One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in fire and gold, Xiao Zhan heard the sound of laughter nearby. A group of village children were playing by the river, their clothes muddy, their joy pure. One of them tripped and fell, and before he could think, Xiao Zhan ran over to help. The little boy looked up and smiled. "Thank you, Gidge." That simple moment struck him harder than any applause ever had. The innocence, the realness, it was something he hadn't felt in years. From that day, he started joining them sometimes, playing, laughing, teaching them to draw and sing. None of the kids knew who he really was. To them, he was just Brother Zhan, the quiet man who told stories by the fire and smiled with his eyes. But every night, when the village fell asleep, he'd sit outside under the stars and think of his fans. Did they miss him? Were they angry that he left without saying goodbye? He wondered if they'd understand. That leaving wasn't running away. It was surviving. One night, he finally turned his phone back on. The screen lit up instantly. Hundreds of missed calls, thousands of unread messages. Fan pages filled with prayers, edits, hashtags. Hashtag, "We miss Xiao Zhan." Hashtag, "Please come back." Hashtag, "Forever with you, Zhan Go." Tears streamed down his face as he read them. He never realized how deeply people cared, how much his absence had left a void in their hearts. He whispered softly into the quiet night, "I'm still here. I just needed to remember how to live again." He looked up at the stars, brighter than ever. And for the first time since the accident, he smiled. Not the smile he gave cameras or interviews, but the one that came from healing. Weeks later, an old man from the village saw him sitting by the river and asked, "You've been quiet, young man, but your eyes, they're starting to shine again." Xiao Zhan laughed gently. "Maybe it's time I stopped hiding." That night, he began writing again. Not scripts, not lyrics, but a message. A message he would one day share with his fans. "I left not to disappear, but to find myself again. The accident broke me, but it also reminded me that life is fragile and beautiful. Thank you for waiting." And as dawn came, painting the sky in gentle pink, he looked toward the horizon and whispered, "It's time to go home, because sometimes you have to walk through the quiet to hear your heart again. Sometimes you have to leave to truly return." And when Xiao Zhan finally steps back into the world, he will no longer be just a star. He will be a man reborn, wiser, softer, and infinitely stronger. Sparkles, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support keeps these heartfelt stories alive, and together, we'll keep celebrating courage, love, and the beauty of starting over. Dizzy.